one of the things that we did discuss was, will this agenda, or the agenda that was here, the 17 agenda items, will they influence research funding in the future? So if it does influence research funding in the future, then it might drive some of the initiatives that the universities are going to get involved in. So it will influence the agenda at the university. It's also going to need to meet the requirements of the business model of the university as well. So if universities will not necessarily make this an agenda for them at the university if it doesn't support the funding model of the university, because essentially they need to be self-sustainable. It would also have to be relevant to the local community in order to have an economic impact with the local community, and that linking some of the priorities with local priorities so that it can contribute locally. So we were looking at the different countries that were sitting around the table. So in the UK, the government set a lot of the agendas that universities have to answer to. And at Exeter, they were mentioning that what they do is they do the grand challenge, where the students work in a multidisciplinary type of sessions, where they address a lot of the similar types of issues that were here. And the students are tasked with how would you solve these types of problems. And a lot of them were very similar to what was here. So it's more of an awareness type of campaign that they do with all of the students to have them to start thinking about these types of global, local, and national types of issues.
Generally, looking at all the priorities that were on the board, we thought that the main important point for universities or higher education as a whole to look at responding the post-2015 agenda is actually about start establishing priorities that are aligned with these goals. And that's actually probably quite a big strategic shift for many higher education institutions. Also hiring potentially new people that can understand the issues or add to the current critical mass or unexisting critical mass, I guess, in the higher education institution that can actually solve problems if we invest a little bit more or prioritize. It doesn't have to be additional money, it can just be a shift in priorities. That actually the quality of the education that's provided by higher education institutions around the world need to also be relevant to the environment where these priorities are important. And that's not always the case, especially when institutions engage internationally. It's usually thinking about their own priorities rather than the country where they're engaging with. We also thought that the universities locally, if the university, the higher education institution locally, in the environment where these priorities are important, need to be seen or promoted as tools, mechanisms that can help solve the problems, not just Western universities, but the local universities. And I think for many universities, especially, again, UK or Western universities, it's probably about thinking about different types of partnerships and seeing how those can be prioritized rather than always seeking the world-class partner that may or may not want to work with us. We also need to look at maybe more partnerships with industry, potentially locally, that have actually the power to fund new research in these areas, the research that may not be prioritized by our governments, but if funded by big local companies, I guess, can actually shift some of the priorities in universities. And we thought that actually in terms of partnerships, not just with institutions, universities or higher education institutions need to be more involved with international associations. So those that actually, the NGOs, the charities, the UN, etc., who actually decide that these goals are important, and maybe the universities need to be at the table at the time of discussion. Somebody said the government needs to ensure that the universities have a voice in international meetings or international fora. And then we started thinking, so actually the universities probably need to demand that they have a voice in this, but that would assume that universities can actually organize and agree together. Lastly, we went a little bit utopian on there when we said the universities generally need to have a partnership with society as a whole, so from local to international to industry to government. And for that, again, I'm sure it's in a lot of universities' strategies and missions that they want to do that, but it's not always a reality.
What universities really need to do is they could either at an institutional, perhaps at a systems level, engage with all the key stakeholders within their relevant communities to highlight the added value that the universities bring to the communities. Universities, if they really wanted to indicate and show the contribution that they could make globally to development, that perhaps help the communities to actually understand the historical developments of universities and how they've historically linked and merged and worked with local communities to solve the problems that they've had. And we looked at the major inventions and major innovations that universities have contributed to society throughout the millennia. And we focused upon, Leslie we focused specifically upon the advances in medicine, in terms of tropical diseases, medicine, disease, contagion management. And if we look at, say, the contribution that universities have actually given general society to this area of expertise, I mean, if you're looking at how the world is developing and how diseases are being managed, if we look at, say, the Ebola outbreak, for example, it's probably quite likely that over the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to have more outbreaks, more contagions. And universities have the in-house expertise to deal with disease management, to deal with the impact of such kind of things that are happening in countries like Africa. And the UN could really do well by consulting with the universities. If you're going to champion your attributes internationally and globally, perhaps it's a good idea to look to build some kind of movement, some kind of national and global movement to champion the attributes and also the great innovations that universities have brought to the world. We agreed that the goals are relevant, the goals are extremely important. In order for universities to demonstrate their legitimacy in how they can perhaps help to solve those problems, we didn't think that all universities would be able to contribute equally. Universities perhaps need to audit their skill sets in order to be able to offer what they can offer. But really, in terms of whether the goals are realistic, I think we kind of came to the conclusion that they were more aspirational. End poverty. Obviously, we'd like poverty to be ended, but we don't think that that's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years. I think we kind of viewed it that they're relevant, they're very, very important, they need to be addressed. As many stakeholders as possible should be involved, but whether they're going to actually solve those problems in those time frames, we don't think that that's going to be the case. However, I don't think that we expected that to be the case. It's a commitment to engaging with those issues in order to try to find working solutions to improve the conditions of people all over the world.